Hello everyone, welcome to another video for software design. We're at lab 7.3 now and we'll be talking about the adapter design pattern. So let's look at the design context. So you might imagine having an application in which you get different messages in different languages. However, some codes may only speak one language. So you might, for example, model a person that only speaks, for example, English and doesn't understand languages other than that. So then the problem comes if we have a message in one language, how do we translate this to a different language? And for a more abstract view, if we have a certain type of class or interface, how do we convert that to a different type of class or interface that other codes can work with? All right, so here you can see the UML diagram for our situation. So we have a English message and a Dutch message. So that's simply a message in Dutch and a message in English. And part of our code only understands messages in English and not in Dutch. So what do? Well, we define an adapter. So as you can see, we have a Dutch to English adapter, which basically converts Dutch messages to English messages. So it goes from one interface to another interface. So now with this adapter, we can use Dutch messages on code that only accepts English messages by letting it go through this adapter first. This way we can use other kinds of classes or interfaces in code that might not accept the classes or interfaces that we actually want to use. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go over to IntelliJ and look at how we implement this adapter. All right, here we are in IntelliJ. So we have the skeleton of the code already set up. So we have a Dutch message and an English message. Both are interfaces with simply just a get message function. And our Dutch to English adapter simply does nothing at the moment. It will be implementing soon. Now let's look at the problem. So I have a Dutch message over here, message in Dutch, and I have a method that I would like to use this message on. However, as you can see, the message only understands English messages. So if I were to try to use this as it is now, so read message, you will see that this does not work. And you will see that I provide a Dutch message, but it needs to be an English message. So I need some way to convert from this Dutch message to an English message. And that's where the Dutch to English adapter comes in. So in here, we'll be adapting our Dutch message to our English message. Now, how do we do this? Well, first we want to make this class implement English message. So we want to make it implement the message that we're going to, or the interface that we're going to convert to. So it will tell me that I need to implement methods, the get message method, since I'm implementing this interface. But I also need the Dutch message because I need to convert from that. That's what we'll be providing in the constructor. So we'll type a constructor, Dutch to English adapter, with a Dutch message. And we'll simply be storing that in the field over here. So we have a Dutch message, which we also call message. And then we simply set the message in here. So we just put this Dutch message that you get into here so we can use it in our message function over here. So now we need to translate this Dutch message that we have provided in the constructor to this English message that we actually want. Now, I'm not going to be implementing an entire translation machine, but we'll just implement something basic to show that it would actually translate over. So maybe for now we'll just type just out of print line. We'll just type translating over here, and maybe instead of just returning the normal message, we'll that's not what I wanted. We'll type translated colon and then the message behind that. All right, so now the message is the original Dutch message, but it translated in front. So you would imagine if you were to actually implement this, this message would go through some kind of translation layer and be turned into an actual English message. In our case, we'll just translate it in front of it to show that it would have been translated. All right, so as you can see, we've now adapted our Dutch message to our English message. So we turned the Dutch message that was passed into the constructor into an English message, or rather we have implemented everything that English message needs to exist. So in this case, the get message. So now we can actually use this adapter in our main class. So this still doesn't work. However, if I now type new Dutch to English adapter and I provide a message, so it does work. So we have a kind of a translation layer and adapter in between this Dutch message. And since this Dutch to English adapter implements this English message, we can immediately pass it to this method. So we don't need any kind of convert method to call first. We can just provide it directly. So let's see what this code does when we execute it. All right. So as you can see, now that we passed this message through this adapter, we get the message translating and then translated, and then the message that we provided in Dutch. And that is being printed here. So this last line is being printed here. So even though this method only works with an English message, because we translate this message over via this adapter, we get an English message that can be used. As you can see, over here, this get message call now refers to this Dutch to English adapter. So that is where this translating line comes from, and also this translated in front of our message. This way, by using this adapter, we don't need to we don't need to create messages for every kind of interface that we design. So you can imagine that if you would have a lot of these interfaces, that you would also need to create many of these read methods. So a read method for Dutch messages, but if you implement more, maybe Spanish messages, Chinese messages, etc., you would need to have a lot of read messages, and maybe you don't control the code at all, right? So this may be in a library and you can't add these messages. So by using an adapter, you can translate one interface or class over to another and then pass it on to that method that expects some other kind of class or interface. All right, that's the adapter design pattern. Hopefully you found this useful, and I hope to see you again in the next lab video.